Hello, Heart Warriors. Diane Kazer here again with another beautiful episode of Heart to Happiness. And this is a project, remember. Our project, the mission is to bring you more awareness to yourself, what brings happiness into your life, and realizing that chronic happiness is not the goal. Now, the social media, the revolution of social media, and seemingly everybody seems happy. Everybody looks pristine and perfect. There's Photoshop, there's Photoshop within apps, there's computer apps that can soften your skin, immediately reduce your wrinkles. Guys, this problem has become an epidemic among women, and I would say mostly women. It's happening everywhere, but of course, a lot of women, including myself. And at this point in my life, I feel the need to be more authentic. And I know a lot of people are wanting just to show up more as themselves and be more accepted. And ultimately, that starts with acceptance of self. And that's why I've brought on the speaker that I brought on today, because it started for her with a health condition that she and I both share, that which we women sometimes can victimize ourselves with. We say, oh, I've got this condition, and we own these conditions as my MS, my Hashimotos, my chronic fatigue, my fibromyalgia, my cancer. And it's like we own these things and it becomes our crutch. And that self-talk is what can become a perpetuating vicious cycle of victimhood. And so today I brought on an amazing girlfriend. I met her in person. I'm so fortunate to know her. She's tuning in from Europe right now, living her dream. And you'll get to hear a little bit of the path that she's walking on right now. That path was not always beautiful, that a lot of it, in fact, has involved a lot of rocks and sticks and dams and oceans and storms, I'm sure, along the way, including currently a cold that she's battling. So, Stacey Robbins, welcome to Heart to Happiness, sister.
Thank you so much, Diane. Thank you for all you're doing in bringing a really empowering conversation to humanity. It's just so important, and I thank you so much for including me in it.
Absolutely. I feel like if I didn't, it would rob them of an opportunity for them to grow, because and you wrote the book, You're Not, how I always screwed up, I go transpose it. You're not crazy and you're not alone.
Yep. Losing the victim. Yeah. You're not crazy and you're not alone. The subtitle is the longest one in the world.
That's why I get all tripped up.
Yeah. Losing the victim, finding your sense of humor, and learning to love yourself through Hashimotos.
Yes. And so I myself had Hashimoto's, I'm pretty sure when I was in my early 20s, late teens, and it wasn't found. And so one of the things that I know that you can speak to, and this is, girlfriends, this is not going to be a super clinical one. We're not going to get super deep in the science. We're not going to talk about labs and markers and things like that. We will talk some about, your thyroid and what you should be looking for and what you can explore with your doctor or me or a practitioner who can help you with this, because one of the things I have found a lot of women, including myself, is an undiagnosed thyroid condition. And what they say about depression today, which is the opposite of happiness, is that about half of the cases of depression are directly related to an underactive thyroid, which means low T3 or just a poor functioning system of conversion in the liver. That's super sciencey. That's probably as sciencey as we're going to get. But Stacey, I would like to open it up for you, because you wrote this book. We all take journeys and we all look to empower others through our own wounds. And I wanted to ask you about specifically yours and how this, because what you write your book about is that this is what helped you grow. This was your turning point, that you could either go victim or victorette. So what was your past, your history, where you kind of were climbing up to that turning point where you went, enough, I don't have to be my disease?
So for me, ascending to this point of getting Hashimoto's has been an interesting journey. I came from a very strong and strict Italian Catholic family in the Northeast. Everything looked really good, even when it wasn't. Our home always looked good. Our food always looked good. We always looked like the perfect family at church or at the country club, or, our bodies looked good. Our family was, my sisters and my mom and my dad. And so, my dad had this harem of beautiful women. And, we were just used to being being able to maintain the outside even when things behind the scenes were falling apart. So I was raised in that kind of culture, and I carried that with me. And because of some of the breakdowns in my life in my childhood, some things that happened, abuses, things that were, the statistics are that 1 in every 3 women gets physically abused, and those kinds of things. I fall into the statistics. Yeah, 1 in 3. When I was growing up, that's what the statistics were. I think it's 1 in 5 women now, but anyway, I'd have to fact check that. But I know that it was 1 in 3 when I was.
No, that's still high. Either way.
Either way. So what happened was I took a real performance-based approach to life. Even though I was a deep soul, even though I was a songwriter and a poet, and I was all of these, really, I was an inner searching kind of person, and I had a really deep spirituality. I would have been called psychic, I guess, and in those terms when I was a kid, I knew things that didn't make sense. I was super intuitive. If somebody put a seed in your hand, I saw a field of flowers. I didn't see what was there. I saw what would be. And I thought everybody did. I didn't realize that, I was kind of walking differently in a world where, everybody brings different gifts to the table, and that was mine, but I didn't recognize it as a gift or see it as that. Well, through a lot of the things that I went through, I ended up turning off a lot of that inner voice. I ended up not always listening to my intuition and not trusting my intuition. I kind of went for guys who weren't necessarily great for me. I overworked when I should have been resting. I prioritized a diet that maybe wasn't healthy for me when I really should have prioritized my health. I was more focused on being skinny, looking good, and just having appearances be what I thought they should be. So that all leading up to a very interesting time. Me being in my mid-20s, married. I'd been married since I was 20. To Rock, who is a year older than me. We'd been married, professional musicians, traveling around the country, working in recording studios, working with different artists on great projects, whether it was Celine Dion or Andre Crouch or for a commercial or something. Just really had, kind of remarkable experiences. And around the age of 25, 26, 27, I was a workaholic. My marriage was not in a very good place. My grandmother had just passed away. I was hit in the first of 2 car accidents. I was separated from my husband. And my dad began the process of dying at a very young age, at 49 years old, from the complications to diabetes, not taking care of diabetes. So this convergence of all those events were like a perfect storm of events that ended up just knocking me for a loop. Suddenly I found myself with chronic sinus infections or stomach issues. I found myself not able to sleep. I was in a huge ache in my body and in pain all day long until I went to bed at night. I started having skin disruptions. My hair wouldn't even color to the right color. I'd spend $240 20 years ago getting my hair done.
That was a long time ago too.
That was a long time ago. And I'd go to Beverly Hills to this guy. This is where I spent, my money. Looking good. He couldn't even get my hair beyond orange. Like, we always got it to orange and never to blonde again. And we couldn't figure out why. I started gaining weight in epic proportions. I was gaining 15 pounds sometimes in 2 weeks. And it was just a rolling snowball. And the more I cut back on foods, the more I tried to medicate this with the things that the doctors were giving me, whether it was pain pills or cholesterol medicine or antibiotics 7 months in a row. All of these things that I was doing to help make these issues go away, none of it was working. Ended up gaining so much weight, got to the point where I was probably 240 pounds. You have to know, I went from being a performer on a stage, people hired me in part for the package, and now I am stuttering. I can't think straight. I am I'm just not anything like I had been, not productive.
Wait. Yeah. What had you been? On stage doing what?
Oh, I was a musician. I was a professional musician.
What did you play?
piano and sang, and I wrote songs. And Rock played saxophone and sang. So we did that as a musical duo across the country. And then we worked with different artists, as I mentioned. So
is that how you met?
Oh, yeah, we met doing music.
Oh, how cool.
It was really cool.
Okay, continue. Sorry.
So, yeah. So life really devolved over the course of less than a year, or about a year's time. And the doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So eventually I collapsed at a place where I was working, and I had PCOS. The doctors found out I had PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is really common with Hashimoto's. And for those who don't know what Hashimoto's is, it's when your body is at war with its own thyroid. It's an autoimmune condition where your autoimmune system is misfiring, and your body's at war with itself, essentially. Instead of fighting the diseases and the problem things, your body starts misperceiving the glands in your own body and going at war against those. So my body was at war with itself. Finally got a diagnosis with Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism. They said, take Synthroid T4, a medical supplement for your thyroid, and you'll be better in 3 months. Well, 3 months later, I wasn't better, and I had gained 30 more pounds. So now I was nearing 300 pounds.
Wow.
So yeah, life was really different. And the doctors told me I was dying. The doctors told me my skin was bleeding all the time. I was a mess physiologically. And they just basically told me at 27 years old to go home and prepare to die, get my affairs in order. My marriage was just coming into a great place. And here I was being told I had to say goodbye to it. I was being told that if I did live, then I'd never have children. And it was a lot of reckoning with the future and with dreams and the way you think that your life's going to be. So I went from being somebody who was just trying to make my life look good again to now I was trying to get my life back again. I was trying to just be alive. And the traditional medical route, as much as I honor the strengths of that, we weren't seeming to find all the answers we needed there. So we went toward the natural route of things. And that had a lot of help because it pointed me toward food. It pointed me toward supplements. It pointed me in the direction of lifestyle. And that was really a valuable part of the conversation. But that wasn't the only part of the conversation. And so the next phase that I went to in this whole thing that Hashimoto's kind of led me to, which became the area that people call me on for expertise, is I really went in on the inside. And I started asking myself, if my body's at war with me, then where am I also at war with myself?
Yes.
What are my thoughts? What are my patterns? What are my beliefs? Like, why do I pick people in relationships who are either condescending or rejecting? Why do I pick people who are controlling and are not happy when I'm happy? They're happier when I'm falling and they get to be in the role of helping me up. Like, what is it about that? Why is the voice inside of my head such a bitchy, naggy voice that just like needs a permanent spa vacation? Why is that voice always so critical? I started looking at my beliefs, not just about, people think beliefs, they think spirituality. My belief about life. Is life for me or is it against me? Am I allowed to have good things? Am I powerful? Where am I powerful? How am I powerful? All of those things. I sat on my couch praying to not die and really going inward, because my thought was, if I can't have health, I want to die in peace. And in my pursuit of peace, I came across these conversations with who I would call God or divine, or just the divine in me, just the conversations with myself and life. And I started asking myself really important questions like, who am I? And what am I here to do? And getting back in touch with the roots of who I was before bad things happened, before hard circumstances came. And when I got back in touch with that part of who I was, I found myself more empowered in my healing journey and more able to activate my health, more able to be in conversations with the doctors or the health practitioners or the naturopaths about protocols that would work for me. I found myself more in the power seat of being in partnership with my healing, not that I was waiting for someone else to bring it to me, but I was really going to be a partner in the sense of I'm in charge of what goes in my mouth. I'm in charge of the thoughts that I think. I'm in charge of the people I hang out with. Like, holy crap, I'm in charge of my life. Like, I'm 100% responsible for my life. I am not a victim, waiting for someone to rescue me. And, that conversation, it wasn't a fast one. It evolved over time. It's still evolving 20 years later. I'm still in that at 47, in a new iteration as I continue to evolve. But really, that's kind of what I ended up doing. I kind of started seeing Hashimoto's as my pathway to ascension. And so you asked me, how did I get to that point? This is how I got to that point. It really was taking it from the superficial pursuit of wanting to look skinny to the deeper pursuit of wanting to be healthy, to the even deeper pursuit of wanting to be peaceful. And that kind of has led to my own holistic journey in using this for my good.
That's beautiful. So you're so articulate. I told you this before we started today. And I was introduced to you by Dr. Isabella Wentz. And
I love her.
Yeah, me too. And if you guys don't know who Dr. Isabella Wentz is, she gets on the more clinical side of Hashimoto's, hypothyroidism, thyroid diseases in general, which is estimated that 20 to 40% of women now have. And my estimation is that like half of us in the next 10 years will probably have some sort of autoimmune disease because, like what Stacey just went on a beautiful rant about is that, I don't know if there's a better word for rant than rant, but organic soapbox, something, but it was beautiful, is that our thoughts chemically, they do produce these things called inflammatory cytokines and all sorts of nasty chemicals that attack that these chemicals, these negative thoughts stemmed by negative thoughts, attack our body, and the immune system thinks that we got to get rid of these chemicals, but it's really that we're triggering our own self-attack, and that could be the final straw that gets us to the point that Stacey had kind of mentioned. She went from this point to this point to this point to this point, and then she went, "Whoa, you're going to die. Wait a second." So, and I've interviewed Dr. Isabella once. You guys can go to my website and see those interviews. They're great. They're more on the clinical side, but this is the more spiritual side, and she introduced us for that very reason, because I thought, I've been in this whole victim side of Hashimoto's myself. And, for me, it wasn't the weight gain, but it was my self-attack with thoughts. And so what I want to ask you, Stacey, because, and if I forgot to say that before we started today, I was introduced to you first, and then somehow along the way, I found Brené Brown. And Brené Brown, if you guys haven't checked her out, she's amazing. She's got great TED Talks about vulnerability, which is exactly how I would describe Stacey, is really coming into an awareness of who you truly are, and then showing up with that, wearing that suit, wearing nothing else, like showing up completely raw, just showing up naked proverbially, and unapologetically being yourself. Not overextending and, not withholding too much, but engaging and connecting. And that's how we do connect, is through shame and vulnerability. So it's really a huge compliment, like I said, that you remind me a lot of her.
Brené Brown is such a remarkable human being. So thank you for that.
As are you. As are you, girlfriend.
Thank you.
So what I was thinking when you were just going on that beautiful story is, for me lately, I have brought back the power and the magic of my unicorn. And what's brought me back to myself is the little girl inside who wants to come out and play with unicorns. And that's my, 5, 6, 7-year-old self that wasn't afraid to be judged, that wasn't afraid to show up as myself, that wasn't afraid to, tell people how amazing they are, that wasn't afraid of people who, the boogeyman, the people who lurk on the outside judging you when you show up as you, and, they stand back and judge because they're not courageous enough to show up as themselves. And so, showing up and being courageous enough to be yourself is the hardest thing, I think, as a human. And so I wonder, when you were going through that, I think I'm back to 7-year-old channeling. Who were you? What age group were you when you said, I went back to that part of myself that wasn't afraid? What age group were you? What was going on in your life at that point? And why was that so empowering for you to channel again?
Yeah, I don't know if I even thought of it as an age. So if I did say that, I'm not sure if I was thinking an age. More of the qualities that I remember having when I was not aware of trying to control circumstances. Like the playful part of me that would just listen to music all day long and get lost in the songs and cry unabashedly, or feel joyful and dance around, not worrying about the size of my butt, or, if I looked cool, going back to those times when you grabbed your band roll-on. I'm the age of where I remember band roll-on had this outer shell, and if you popped the deodorant out, it looked like a microphone, and I'd stand in my, in my bedroom and sing with my girlfriends to whether it was Pink Floyd or Joan Jett or whatever, just those parts of us that haven't been tainted by a judgment about ourselves. So it was those qualities of just being intuitive, of like really forgiving someone and not thinking about should I forgive them, but just being drawn by the desire. Whether it was a friend who stole my toys or a girlfriend who wanted to steal my boyfriend, just that part of me leaning into that, or the intuitive part of me that would speak life into people. I was somebody who wasn't very, I was friends with everybody, but I wasn't in a particular clique or group. So I was kind of like, I was friends with everybody. They came to me when they wanted to have a confidant who would love them and not judge them. But I didn't get remembered when someone was going, hey, let's go to the soccer game or the football game, like ask Stacey, because I wasn't part of the clique. And I would sit at home and I would write songs instead. And I would just, I'd go for walks in the cemetery that was nearby, not in a morbid way, but so me getting back in touch with the part of me that was free enough to do those things, to be there for people even if they weren't there for me, to be generous even without any thought for myself. Those kinds of things, like that's when I feel most alive, and that's when I got more back in touch with who I am, and when I'm not worried about who I think I should be.
Do you think that you could have gotten there back to this point had you not been told that you had a few months to live?
Sure. I think we all have a lot of different pathways we can get there. And I even wonder what is, and this is a really big question, and I don't have an answer for it. It's just a big question. Do we create this as our pathway? Do we create, an autoimmune disease is the way that I'm going to use in my life to get to where I need to go? Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. But I can just tell you that I do believe that we can get there other ways. I just think that this is the way that I had in front of me. Whether I chose it or not, it was in front of me and I used it. And I still use it.
So that's, it's really funny how life works, and how, the connections and what we ask, the intentions, like when you were telling me earlier, and I'll let you guys know what Stacey's doing right now. She's in Europe, and she's traveled 5,200 miles in 5 weeks to 8 cities and has done 12 events. And these things she all created herself. It's like when people sit back and go, well, someone will approach me, someone will find me, someone will fix me. That's why I don't like that Coldplay song, I Will Try to Fix You. It's like, you're not broken. But
Totally.
Like we can fix ourselves. Like we don't need someone outside of us or things outside of us to fix us. We can pave our own path. And then if you ask, and if it's destined to be, then there's yeses all over the canvas. And so I sought out, when I first did this, created this adventure, the Heart to Happiness project. A big part of it stemmed from 2 of my best friends going to rehab. They weren't happy with themselves. They were having body dysmorphia issues, relationship problems, self-insecurities. And that was a part of it. And then my aunt died of cancer. And I thought, can we look at disease like a blessing? How can we look at it like a wake-up call instead of a call for death, and instead of a mortality victimhood where we just, oh, well, I guess this is it. I guess I just better pack my bags. That's what they said. Instead of looking within at an inner voice that says, no, you don't have to take that route. You can take a different one and you can prevail. It's like, which voice are we willing to listen to? So the disease being the blessing, you help a lot of women. And I love being in your Facebook group. You guys got to check that out too, The Girlfriend's Guide to Hashimotos. She's got a lot of women in there, over 5,000 women, right?
There's about 4,000 right now.
Yeah,
we have a huge waiting list because my mods can't go through all the we filter everybody. We check out everybody to make sure the girlfriends are safe.
Yeah.
And so we've got hundreds in the queue waiting to get in.
Oh, that's awesome. So in there, and it's a beautiful sanctuary. the seeds. I like how you plant seeds using the seed analogy. And what we've got in there is we've got many women who are struggling because, like you said earlier, their hair is falling out. Their skin is a wreck for what they see in the mirror. They're gaining weight or they're extremely losing weight. They are reacting negatively to foods. So what I see in there is a lot of positivity of, even though you're struggling with these conditions and the symptoms and whatever you see in the mirror, you are not that. So can you walk us through and sprinkle some hope into some of the women who are experiencing that? Maybe it's because of their thyroid, maybe it's not, but just what's going on as you see yourself in the mirror one day and you see all this, and what are the thoughts that could turn us around, that can get us on the right path to, I can do this on my own. I've got it inside.
So going from a place where you're not feeling that and turning that around, you know, I really think that we can turn it around. Sometimes it takes, you know, you're asking a question and my brain is going like on three different levels. Like sometimes it's something as simple as seeing your dog walk across the room and going, "Oh, I love you. I have to live for you." Like sometimes those moments happen when someone's like ready to end their life or just, you know, just be in despair. Sometimes it's just remembering their connection to someone they love. Now, can you generate that? Can you go, "I'm feeling really despairing"? Yeah, you can reach out to someone who you know you feel connected to and love, even though there's so much in you that wants to, you know, stay back and retreat and just wallow in your pity and stay in the mud, you know, be the pig in the mud. So I think that's one of the things. You can reach out for the thing that makes you feel connected to the vibrant parts of life. I think that using a gift that you have, when I encourage other women and when I am using my strength, see, a disease is really all about living kind of in your weakness, you know? And so when you pull yourself out of that and you operate then in your strengths, you're reminding yourself in an active way that of the value you have, of what you bring. You know, when you're just sitting in the slop of, I feel tired, I feel angry, I feel hurt, I feel disappointed, I don't feel like I could trust my doctors, I don't feel like there's any hope for me. Those are all those, you're in that time, which is super understandable. Everybody walks through that. Almost everybody walks through that who's in a physical health situation. So it's almost like a rite of passage, but it's a place to pass through. You can pass through that and those feelings, and you can, you know, that's why you'll hear people say, if you're feeling down, go help somebody. Yes. Go serve somebody a meal who's in need. Go give a homeless person $5. Go help a neighbor, you know, an elderly neighbor, bring out her trash or weed her garden. Because when you start serving, you really get out of some of the myopic thinking that can happen during being depressed and sick. You know, and it's like, God, if I can sit on my bed and feel this way, I can go sit on Alice's lawn, my 92-year-old neighbor, and help her with the weeds and talk to her and listen to the wisdom and perspective. So sometimes helping somebody else gets us out of our mess. You know, some of the other things that are really powerful for me are noticing my own thoughts. You know, hearing the conversation in my head. Once I notice what's going on, notice the conversation, what happens is that I end up not reacting to the conversation. I become the observer. And then as the observer, it's sort of like I'm just watching a tennis match. I'm watching my thoughts bounce back and forth. And I realize that I don't have to play that game with them. I don't have to be involved in that. I can just observe and go, wow, that is a really negative thought. Wow, that's a really negative train of thought that's going on right now. Why? And I can ask myself some questions, you know, inquiry. Why am I thinking that way? Well, part of it is because you were raised that way. You were raised to kind of anticipate the negative. That was the conversation around the Italian table, you know, was, oh my God, look at what happened to that guy. Oh my God, look at what happened to Vincenzi. And she got that. She tripped. She got a spider bite. Oh my God, we're going to end up in the hospital. Like I was raised in that, right? So I tell myself, good job being such a student of what you were raised in. That's part of why you're thinking that. Okay, well, if that's only one way of thinking, I mean, you went to another person's house, they didn't talk that way, didn't think that way. So what's another thought that would make you feel good? And why don't you want to feel good? Like, does it feel safer to feel bad? Does it feel safer to be hopeless? What's the risk in having hope? Like, I start asking myself those questions. And when you start asking yourself some of those questions, you'll find yourself engaging with the higher part of yourself instead of that low level, just the negativity and reacting to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'm interested to hear, because I'm, a part of my childhood too was that same thing. It's like, oh, did you see? And it was like, whoa, you know, it was just dramatized. It's like, did you see the news? And I'm like, no, as my 30-year-old self, I'm like, no, I don't want to see the news ever again.
Right.
Because, you know, as I've gotten older, it's gotten more negative and more dramatic and, you know, sensationalized. But, and I'm really proud. My mom, I was talking to her the other day on the phone, and she was like, Diana, it's really hard for me to pick up the paper anymore. And I went, oh, really? Now she's retired and she's got more time than ever, but she said that. And I went, oh my God, yay. Because that means that she can now be an observer of her own news and live her own story. Right. And so it's like, I always say, I don't really like going to movies. I like being the movie. And so to hear my mom, you know, who was so involved in needing to know what was going on around her at all times, and now needing to be involved in her own life, it was so liberating, because it meant that now I feel like it's a safe place to call and engage with her, because she's now unplugged from that drama and trauma. So I'm curious, because I was raised, sounds like similarly to you, not Italian, but I've been the victim too. Big time. Like my early 20s, mid 20s, I was super successful in financial planning. You know, people looked at me like, how do you have all these things? And I got judged, and that pushed me even farther away from myself, because then I was scared. And so then I became the victim and the victim and the victim. And I got more viruses and more viruses and more diseases. And that's what led me to this the kick that I'm on now. But my negative self-talk has been so loud since then. Before then, playing pro soccer, I've been operating out of this hardware that is not conducive to love and connection and shame and vulnerability. And so I'm totally curious to hear how you took, because I know a lot of women do this, and men too, but this negative self-talk. I want to hear if you could be so vulnerable to kind of walk us through the chatter. Here is my negative self-talk. And then here is the ping pong, the new development of self of, well, like you just said, I can take this path, or I can start to, you know, I'm aware of these thoughts. But so how did you start to replace them where you were eventually ascending? Like, really, what did you say to yourself? What did you see in the mirror?
Oh, yeah. You know, I mean, I hope you don't mind if I swear. Do you mind if I swear?
Go for it.
Or I can use the substitute.
Be you.
Thank you. Okay, so what would happen is, like, I'd be saying, oh my God, you're so fucking stupid. I can't believe you fucking said that. Like, you could have just been quiet. Why can't you just be quiet and smile? Why can't you just be like Lady Diana and just have a grace about you and a playfulness? Why do you have to be so serious? Why do you have to be such a pain in the ass? Like, why can't you just be easy? Why can't you be easy? Like, you know, and that's this much. And that conversation went all the way through the day. And it was smatter that had in between, it was peppered with thoughts every few seconds of, if you do this, you're going to die. You know, you're going to die if you do this. Like, I'm talking about since I was a child, that kind of negative thinking, fear-based thinking, like it would just creep in of, you know, oh, if you do it, what happens if you die? What happens? And it was like this consumption. Oh no, you're going to go on a plane. Oh, I hear a plane going overhead. Does that mean it's going to crash into the house? Like this wild consumption with you know, am I safe, was going all throughout this critical thing inside of my mind. And, you know, some people walk into a hotel room and go, okay, you know, we're in a hotel room. How cool. We'll get to jump on the bed and watch TV and do whatever and go to the pool. And I'm thinking, where's the exit in case there's a fire? You know, like my brain just kind of rolled through that kind of concern and worry all the time. And it was like there was no joy in life. So, okay, those were some of the prevailing thoughts. And the question is, like, how did you shift them? It was different ways over time. It wasn't just any one thing that I did. There were times when I would go on a spiritual journey that included fasting. I would do fasting, and I would make I would do like spiritual readings. I'd read different philosophers or different religious, gurus, and I would just have a time of fasting. Maybe it wasn't always completely gone with food. Maybe I'd just have broth for 40 days or something. And I'm not telling anybody to do that. I'm telling you what I did. And it was interesting because I'd find that at the end of that time where, let's say I sat and I meditated or I did prayerfulness or whatever the words are, for that time period, let's say it was 40 days, which I remember doing one time, I noticed that at the end of that time, or during the middle of that time, I'd see things starting to shift in my thinking. And I'd notice that some of the voices would abate. And I'd get to the end of that, and I'd realize that some of the things that were really bothering me stopped bothering me. I didn't make them go away. I didn't do the fast to make those things go away, but I just kind of honored that inspiration to do the fasting. And the byproduct of that was the voices in my head started changing. That was one thing that I noticed. Another was that I took on a spiritual practice of resting. And it was for 15 minutes a day doing nothing. And I just started this conversation. It lasted about 2 years, that particular conversation with God. And I realized how restless I was as I was resting. I realized how many questions I had. I realized how busy I was in my life because I didn't feel peace with all the questions that I did have. And so in my resting, I noticed that the questions came up, and that through the questions, I rested some more. And through that, I ended up having some revelations about myself, about how arrogant I was as a substitute for true security. I felt so insecure that I took on arrogance as sort of my cover-up. I had to be a know-it-all. And I wasn't peaceful with saying, I don't know, because it meant that I wasn't worth being with. Through that time, I had a revelation of my judgments, and that I was a really judgmental person, maybe in the name of whatever else. It was really that I was judgmental because I felt out of control. And life is like riding a unicycle, and judgment gives you handlebars. It gives you this sense of control of, I can at least know this about you because I decided this about you. So if I decide that you're a bad person, I write bad person on the file, and every time I open it up, I don't have to relate to you anymore. I could just relate to the file. I don't even have to be in a personal relationship with you. I can be totally in control of naming you, shaping you, defining you, and interacting with you, all based on my judgment. And that made me feel safer. And I got really clear about my pride, and that was coming from fear, that sometimes I would take credit for things that I knew were really the divine in all of us kind of things. And I think it was because I just didn't trust. I was afraid to trust life. I was afraid to trust and surrender. So during my resting time, those revelations came, and some more of the voice quieted in my head. And then, sometimes it quiets through yoga, my yoga practice, or my meditation, or my Jin Shin Jitsu. And then probably one of the most powerful ones that I've had recently is the last 2 years, I've done a 100-day gong. I've done 4 100-day gongs at this point.
Oh yeah, you were starting that, or you were talking about that when we met.
Mm-hmm. And a 100-day gong is a Taoist practice where you have complete integrity for 100 days doing a practice that you say that you will do. So it's 100% integrity. You do it every day, whether it's, I'm going to do yoga every day for an hour, I'm going to meditate for 15 minutes, I'm going to knit for half an hour, whatever it is, you do it, and you do it 100%. I started and because there's a whole, there's a spiritual reason behind it for the people who started it in China, but there's a whole physiological response. The brain breaks and builds certain life habits at the 90-day mark, and this takes you 10 days over. And it was amazing to me how I noticed that not only was my voice, that critical voice, quieter, a new voice came in. And it was, you're so strong. You are so powerful. I am so proud of you. And it was like, and I can't remember if it's like, I'm so proud of me, or I'm so proud of you. I can't remember which, person it was speaking in, first, second, or third person, but I was just, or first or second person, but I just remember going, oh my gosh, I have an I'm so proud of me voice in there. And so I truly believe that action consistently over time can shift that voice.
Wow. And you said, like, what I thought was, you said the new voice, and I thought, that's not the new one. That's the one that always
original.
Yeah, that's
Right.
the one that you came here with. That was the OG. That was the original gangster voice that you came here with. And then life
Totally.
quiets it and buries sand over it. And it's like this little thing that just comes out of the sand, and all of a sudden you're back at your I'm proud of you, and everything is magic no matter, what the outcome. You tried. I love that. So the 90-day thing, do you recommend that people, because I think this is important, I'm asking also for myself, is it like a 15 minutes a day thing? Do you do it alone? Do you just set, like, how do you set that table for 100 days? What's the best way of approaching that?
That's a great question. And I learned the hard way not to take your old wish list of everything you wish you had ever done in life that you feel like you failed at and turn it into a 100-day gong. Don't do that. Don't go, oh my gosh, I want to lose 50 pounds and make $1 million. And I want to read all the books that are on my shelf and visit with all my old friends. And I'll turn that into a 100-day gong. Oh my gosh, you're going to just feel like you have no life.
100-day wrong.
Yeah, right. That's good. People ask me what to do, and I say, look, if you can't think of anything, meditate at least 5 minutes a day. If you can't think of anything. Now, there was a woman who came to me. She had just lost her husband. He was a private pilot, and there was something wrong with the plane, and he crashed into a mountain. I think it was a couple of days before Thanksgiving, and it was right before the very first gong. And she reached out to me and said, I'm so inspired by this gong thing you're doing, but I don't know what to do. I'm just in such distress and grief from losing my husband, but I feel like I'm supposed to do the gong. What do you think I should do? And I really felt like I was not in a position to tell her what to do. I said, what are you inspired to do? And her answer so touched me. She said, I feel like I want to take 7 conscious breaths a day. And I'll tell you her stories of what that 7 conscious breaths, because you have to imagine how, like, she's living in her head, she's living in her grief, she's living in the I locked myself out of the house and there's no one to call to let me in because he's gone kind of world. Like, she would pause and just breathe consciously on those breaths 7 times a day, 7 breaths a day. And it was part of her healing. So really, I want to put the ball back in other people's court and just ask them to inquire within and say, what am I inspired to do? What would be life-giving to me? Not what is my wish list of how I wish I would be, or, she really went in and listened, and I honor people learning how to listen again to their soul, because that's one of the things with autoimmune conditions I have found is that we very much cut ourselves off between our head and our body. Usually our body has been vandalized in some way, or it's at war with itself. So, we turn off that intuitive listening and we get very much in our head. We get very analytical. We get very critical. We get very much into thinking things through and worrying about them. And to be able to come back into that listening space and just say, I need to learn again how to listen to the whole of me, because that will help me be whole, is really an important part. So if you can't think of anything to do, I highly recommend 5 minutes of meditation a day to start for 100 days and set yourself up to win, because that 1 degree variable over time really does take us on a really different course. But if you are willing to go within and ask yourself that question, I'd invite you to do that.
Absolutely. That's whenever I do intake forms for clients and patients, it's like, what do you want with your life? And then they do that exact list that you just said. I want this, I want to be able to go back to work. I just want these migraines to go away. I want to have a sex drive again. I want to lose 30 pounds. I'm like, did you come to this earth to lose 30 pounds? Did you come to this earth to lose your migraines? You came to this earth to gain something, and to gain something through the giving of others and sharing your gift and receiving the love that comes back from, the manifestations that it creates. It's a huge, massive wave. And it's really like a tornado when you bring it up, a tornado of love instead of a tornado of hate and what you're supposed to be. And so that's a tough question for a lot of people. And I always recommend go somewhere that you can, go somewhere where you feel safe and you can open up to yourself. I mean, I feel like a lot of people don't even open up to themselves. They're too scared of discovering who they really are. As Marianne Williams says, it's our light that scares us the most. And did you ever have moments like that too, Stacey, where you started to get in touch with that light inside of you and you were like, whoa, and you realize this is really strong. And it's like the ribbon cutting of the victimhood. Like when you leave it behind, you're like, I felt that a couple times where it's like, I'm losing that, like I'm divorcing that identity deliberately. And on the other side of this ribbon cutting is the real light, the real liberation that is myself. Did that scare you at all ever? Like, whoa, or maybe just shock you better than scared.
I think I remember becoming aware that my power was really powerful and feeling like I have like blotted my spiritual lips, so to speak, so that the lipstick wouldn't be so glossy and bright. Like in some ways, I feel like I have taken myself down out of the power thing because I thought that it would be too much for people. And that assessment of myself really was not coming from my highest self, because the highest self isn't afraid to be itself, right? So, but it's okay, because I think that we glimpse who we are, and we're glimpsing who we are from that place of really trying to discover who we are. So there's still, maybe if you want to use the word ego involved, there's still a part of us that's thinking, filtering our strengths through our fears. And but really what I've come to is that, I'll say it this way, a lot of the messaging in our life culturally is, oh, you have these strengths, now you have to play them down, or you have these strengths, but you have all these weaknesses. Make sure you focus on your weaknesses so you can stay humble. Like there's a lot of that in the religious messaging of our culture. You know, Western religions do that, and so I think when I got freed up from some of that, I became more comfortable with the light. And raising children, I will tell you, Diane, has also helped me, because they're really powerful, beautiful light workers, my children, and when I see their strengths, I go, those are beautiful strengths. And I hear some people will say to me, oh, I have to make sure I remind my kids of their weaknesses so they can be balanced. What? And I just say to them, you know what? I don't know that being reminded of our weaknesses makes us more humble. I think what happens is when we raise up, like we have our strengths that grow up. And then when you raise up also wisdom, when you raise up also graciousness around it, when you raise up connection to humanity and gratitude, when you raise those things up around our strengths, you gain humility. You don't have to push yourself down to balance out your power. You raise other things up so that you can live in your power in connected ways with life. So that's kind of the journey I have been on. So was there a specific ribbon cutting? I don't know, but I think there's been more comfort with my light and my power as I've grown through this process, you know?
Yeah. I think it comes in momentary, pieces too. It's like, there's always ascension. Ascension is not a linear thing, right? You're like, some people feel like, okay, well, I'm going to shoot for B and it's just going to be this linear line. It's like, no, there's going to be a lot of ink. It's like the stock market. Oh.
You're going to love this. I'm going to tell you this too. Before our interview tonight, I wasn't feeling well. I'm like, my eyes were super puffy. I'm like, oh my God. And I've got to make dinner for my family. I'm counseling a client tonight in the US. And I had to send my kids out. And like, I'm being sorry, you can hear other people.
Yeah,
sorry.
it's all good.
It's all right. But my kids were being like not helpful and talking to me and in my way. And we've got a kitchen that can fit basically 2 butts. And I've got 3 in the kitchen. I'm like, get out of the kitchen. I need to do this. Oh my God, Rocky, get on. Make sure you can get on with Diane. Oh my gosh, she said Google. I don't know Google. Oh my God, I'm 47. I don't know technology. Like I'm totally short circuiting, And I'm going, what am I doing? Like I had to pause at the sink after I've just been like in bitch mode. And I'm just like, wait, what am I doing? Oh, I'm doing a Heart to Happiness interview. Okay. What resources are inside of me to get back to my heart and my happiness right now? And I'm like, just notice this. Just let this work for you. Let this be life. Don't let this be undermining. The kids are not trying to undermine you. Your husband's not trying to undermine you. What did you miss in this whole thing, Stacey? Oh, I missed communicating effectively and being a manager of my time. That's what I missed. I missed telling the boys that by this time, Mama needs to have you guys clear the deck. By this time, I'll have dinner ready. By this time, I missed communicating. So once I kind of got present to the chaos that was going on and that I was basically the creator of it, I was able to own it differently, and then it had less power. And I really think that that's real life, because, you know, we talk about ascension, we talk about being powerful, we talk about our light and amazing things about ourselves. But the truth is that we're living real life in real time. And the thing that we want is, it's like you said, and I so honor that you said this, it's not about chronic happiness. That's not the goal. The goal isn't chronic happiness. The goal really is being able to come back to presence with ourselves and to life and love in our heart faster than we did maybe last time. You know, like getting back the shorter path rather than the long path of being the victim, waiting for someone to rescue us, waiting for life to serve us, and really recognizing our power to shift a moment, to shift a situation, to shift out of our bitchiness and to take control again. Instead of going, oh my gosh, you're all doing this to me. You're all making me crazy. No. I contributed to my craziness. I own it. All right. Then I started communicating clearly. So coming back to center is really my part of my healing journey, you know?
Yeah, no, I love that. That's super vulnerable what you just said. And that's a perfect example of a real life moment that I know I would struggle with. And I don't even have kids or a husband to be bitchy about. I've got me and all the voices inside that may make up a family of 10 because of how strong they can be, you know? But we all have that. And that, what you just said it's a liberation for women, or anybody at all, if they are courageous enough to be aware of their thoughts and realize that our thoughts are not us. We didn't come here as a baby thinking, get out of my way. You know, that grew over time. And the closing thoughts, and then we'll sum up your top 3 takeaways, which I've written down. So I'm not sure if you have new ones or I can sum them up, but we'll go with both. Is that, and these are the notes I wrote down, is that it's not things going my way to happiness. It's not perfection to happiness. It's not success to happiness. And it's not money to happiness. It's not fame to happiness. It's our heart and not our ego to happiness. And I was sketching some pictures as you were talking, like you got me drawing, which is really neat. You got me in my creative space. And I was like, wow, that's a pretty empowering vision I've got right there because of what you said. Words are very powerful. So I would imagine you probably look different on the outside than you do on the inside when you're destructing like that, right? Like your self-destruction. Does it show on the outside, or are you doing a pretty good job of showing yourself differently?
I don't know what you mean by that. Help me understand what you mean by showing yourself differently.
Like when you're going through your mindset of, oh, you guys are on my way, get out of my way. Are you like, hey, honey, would you mind just getting out of the kitchen? Or are you like, get out of my way, you guys are all in my way? Like, can they feel it and sense it? Are you expressing it the way that you're feeling it? Or are you doing it? I mean, because what I'm getting at with this is people can do a really good job of being very poised and put together on the outside, but really on the inside, they're just self-destructing.
Yeah, you know, I think there's also a third option, and that is that you're conscious while you're being in that space. So for me, I try to remain conscious of that these are human beings that I don't want to destroy while I'm expressing myself. So it's not self-expression at any cost. When I'm in a whatever that word is that we want to use, when I was frustrated, when I was like, I felt like everybody was in my way, I try not to talk to anybody that way. Though it does come out like, guys, come on, I need you out of here. You know, like, but I am not a screamer. I'm not a swear at somebody kind of person in general. I am just really, because I was raised in a lot of that. And I know how destructive that is to a sensitive spirit. And so one of those things that grew up inside of me alongside my strengths was self-control with those words. Because I know the power, I am a writer, I'm a speaker, I am a intuitive. I know the power of words for good. And I also know that as a mom and a wife, I'm an influencer. And so I have to also recognize that when I'm breaking down, that if I choose words that express myself, like I am frustrated, I need your help, I ran out of time. When I do that, it becomes less blaming and less finger pointing. And I try to stay conscious within my breakdowns. Doesn't mean that I'm always perfect at it, but that is something that I do call myself to, and I create an intention about in my life because I love these people and I don't want to destroy them while I'm having a hard moment.
Yeah, because who wants to help someone when they're being blamed, right?
Right. I mean, and you can still do that because I'm a mom and my kids will blame me sometimes and I still help in the middle of that. And that's also an example that you rise above, you get the job done, even if someone's not being kind to you in that moment. You're committed to them. Your kid's having a breakdown. They can't find their soccer cleats, or they're losing their shit over something. And you're like, I gotta maintain the higher vision. We're going to get through this. We'll have the conversation after. No one's going to listen to me have a real heart-to-heart moment right now. Find the cleats, get in the car. We'll get there. Afterward, we're going to sit down and talk.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. You know, I wrote all these other notes down too. Like, you know, I feel like so many women can be jealous and judgmental, and, you know, the whole, like, no, that's your problem. You know, like speaking to your kids, like, no, you guys figure that out. Don't put your, you know, freak out moment on me. It's like, I don't have time for that. I see that people can keep it keeps them safe, the judgment and the jealousy. It keeps them safe wearing that hat of insecurity to protect the arrogance. And that's the thing that I see on social media a lot, is the arrogance, feeling that they need to show up a certain way and not being. And I asked you that question because I wonder how in alignment you were with your thoughts versus your actions. And I think that that's where a lot of people are disconnected today. And so, you know, what's interesting about this whole interview is, you know, I emailed you and I wanted to talk a little bit about Hashimoto's and how hypothyroid can contribute to depression. And I did share some of those statistics today. So ladies, if you are experiencing any, you know, pretty severe depression, you know, first of all, take some of the steps that Stacey and I have talked about today. Write some things down, journal. I think there's some pretty awesome exercises in this video, amazing ones actually. And also, you know, have your thyroid checked, like, you know, make sure you have your antibodies checked, not just your TSH, T3, and T4. And that's for a separate video. If you guys are interested in the thyroid stuff, you can go to my website and read up about what hypothyroidism means, how to heal yourself from Hashimoto's. I actually have a whole program on it. Stacey wrote a book about it. You guys got unlimited resources on that. But that's what I think is awesome, is that I totally became disengaged and uninterested in talking about the thyroid because really, the thyroid is just what so happened to be what our body attacked because of our own self-destruction. So I'm like, wait, oh yeah, that's right. We were supposed to talk about the thyroid. Oh, well, I mean.
But this applies to, there are such universal things in the talking about it. You know, the thyroid, it's our voice box. The thyroid is our self-expression. The thyroid is, you know, how 60% of the women who I surveyed were physically or sexually abused as a child, and they weren't allowed to tell anyone. You know, where did that affect their voice? Several were raised in repressive, spiritual, religious environments, sects, cults, that kind of thing. They weren't allowed to speak their piece. They weren't allowed to speak their truth. Or they were in a cultural environment that was very oppressive, and they weren't allowed to represent what they wanted, how they wanted it. When something felt wrong, they weren't allowed to honor that voice. You know, that's sitting right here. That's our journey. You know, some people go to past life stuff. They talk about, you know, the hangings that happened and the tongues that were cut out of women who were self-expressed and who were activists, you know, in years past. And I don't know a lot about past lives. I don't go down that road very often, but the people who do, they'll say, you know, gosh, we've got an epidemic in this generation because of the things that happened in the generations before. That's an interesting, I'm just a shine the flashlight kind of person down the corridors of possibility. So, and I will say this about depression and Hashimoto's hypothyroid. I interviewed an FBI agent, in a former FBI agent for my book. She actually became a friend, and that's how I ended up. It was a very organic interview, but she was the person who was called on to look behind the scenes at mysterious deaths. And after a while, she started seeing a thread of connection between homicide, suicide, and the thyroid that were depression generated. And so she started calling the, who's the dude? Autopsy. Coroner. She started calling the coroner and saying, do me a favor, that person who committed suicide, would you check their thyroid? Do me a favor. And it was interesting that coroner kept coming back going and said it was either the thyroid had either completely disintegrated There was no thyroid left in that depressed person, or it was like the size of a pea and really hard. Like weird stuff. So I do want to affirm your connection, and there is a physiological connection, even though we haven't talked about it. But depression, you know, it really is important. If depression is not going away, that you go and take that symptom to your doctor, because it could very well be your thyroid. So,
wow, that is interesting.
And I do want to say this too about because I know you were talking about with the kids, and are you the same person? You know, you're very conscious. Are you conscious in your conversation? When I'm not, I come back and apologize. When I'm not, I own it. Because here's the thing with kids that I learned as a kid, is that kids will take stuff that is not theirs emotionally from their parents. So if it's their parents' issue, the kids will take it on if they think they risk love. So I try to always let my kids know, you know, I love you. I screwed up. This part was mine, and I take responsibility for it. I really try to alleviate any burden from them in that way emotionally, as a conscious parent, as conscious as I am now. You know, in 10 years, I'll look back and go, oh God, I could have done that better. But right now, this is where I am. You know,
Yeah.
I own it. And I tell my kids, I couldn't love you better. I couldn't love you more, but I could love you better. I am learning how to, you know, unravel the selfishness in me. I'm still on a journey, and I'm sorry for the parts that affect you, but you can be a ninja in life. And ninjas don't just use the easy things. They use the hard things to be a ninja. So be a ninja and use my weaknesses to be strong. That's really being powerful in life. Use everything.
And that on the other end, you know, you're the mother talking about the influence on the children and being aware of that. But on the receiving end of someone who was raised differently and their parents didn't give them that awareness, but yet the child wore the burden of the parents' weaknesses unconsciously. And then how does that child grow up to treat others around them, mainly themselves? Like, how do they treat themselves? How do they treat others? How are they able to connect? Are they able to connect? And I notice a lot of people today who have a hard time connecting and having relationships and putting, you know, prioritizing love and prioritizing their own self-care, you know, starting there, is that they were abandoned as a child, like literally abandoned, and they feel unworthy. And then rather than being aware of their unworthiness, you know, that they inherited from their parents and maybe past lives, who knows, their unworthiness becomes this, you know, it could come out as projection and blaming, and it's your fault, when really on the inside they're unworthy. And that's a part of what I experienced in this whole 6-month trauma of mine, is I was abandoned by someone who was abandoned. And that relationship went from, I want to be with you for the rest of my life, to completely disappearing. And I went, what just happened? And then I took it personally. And then hearing what you just said, you know, of course, it's a lot of work I've done on myself, and realizing it's not about me. It never is about us. But we take accountability for what we do believe is about us, especially when you're impacting 2 children that you're growing and raising. So God, Stacey, I feel like I could keep going on and on and on with you. This is so beautiful. I like what you're doing for me. I'm sure that our listeners are going, wow, like I didn't realize how these things were impacting my life or the loved ones around us then that impact us. So ending on a note that, you know, I've written some things down as far as like the top 3 takeaways that people, other than of course checking their thyroid, you know, if they're really struggling with depression, have your thyroid checked, and not just the T3, T4, TSH, and then having the antibodies checked as well. TSH between 1 and 2 is great. We can go into all that stuff in a different place. Dr. Isabella Winston I interviewed. But what are the top 3 things that you would recommend for people's takeaways today, so they can use their heart as a means to happiness as opposed to all of the external things?
Well, we talked about them, so I will just say the very first one, even though I didn't write this down on my little list I was going to share with you of 3 things, so you get this bonus 4th one, is breathe. Breathe, because so often we hold our breath, and, you know, breath is life, and you are the divine breath, and when you breathe, you experience your connection to life. So we hold our breath when we're in pain. We hold our breath when we're afraid. We get shallow breathing and end up messing up a lot. Our cells need breath. Our brain needs breath. Our heart needs breath. Our connection to ourself is in our breath. So that's something that I want to share. Just stop and breathe. and get back in connection with yourself that way. The other thing is that notice the voice in your head. Recognize that voice in your head and start to become the observer instead of the reactor. And when you start observing it as if you are watching a play, you'll stop being part of the drama in your life, and you'll just start noticing where the drama is. Noticing it is half the battle. The third one, which now will be of 4, is choose where you are. It is so easy when you have a diagnosis or a hard relationship or a job that you don't love that you just wish and want it to be different. You wish that you weren't there. You wish that you were in a different place. You wish that your butt were smaller. You wish that you had a husband who made more money. You wish that your kids would behave at the restaurant. Wishing doesn't get you to the place of realization, of having that thing. What happens is when you choose where you are and go, everyone's breaking down right now. Everyone's melting down. That's just the way it is. And I choose it as imperfectly as it is. I choose it for the way it is. In the choosing, it's the access point to shifting it. If we keep resisting it, we keep creating it. We keep generating more of what we don't want. So choosing where we are is the doorway to getting where we want to be. And then the other thing that I do is I look for what's the benefit in this discomfort? Like, what's the good that I can get from this? How can I transmute this? How can I turn this around? How can I use this? Instead of this being the elephant sitting on my chest, how do I turn this into a tool? How can I turn this into a tool in my toolbox? How can I use this to shovel the crap out of my life? How can I use this to ascend? How can I use this to be more of who I'm supposed to be here on earth? So that's what I do when I'm in a situation of that I want to turn things around quickly, is I look for how can I use this to bring me closer to who I am and what I'm here to do.
Is that your 4th one?
That's my 4th one.
I love that one. That one's like that could be the chronically optimist. and you can't be chronically happy, but you can be chronically a student, chronically an observer, and as much as you can. I think that's really what this is about, is the being presence. That TED Talk, I like talking about that one. The more present that we are, regardless of the circumstances, the more happy we are in that moment, regardless of the outcome. So, Stacey, we came on here. I met you through the thyroid. I met you through our thyroid struggles, and I feel like there's just something much deeper. There's so many more metaphysics behind this. And you mentioned something about past life trauma, and I guess there's a whole new science behind this. And I talked with Michael McAvoy about that a little bit. If you guys want to listen to that interview, such a trip talking about past life trauma that we carry on genetically. And I went, wow, that's a trip. I mean, I don't even know how that would be quantifiable, on a lab test.
Quantum. Probably, but I'm excited to hear about it.
Yeah. I wrote down, I was like, there is such a thing. So thank you so much from the bottom of my thyroid and my heart. My thart rhymes with fart. Thank you from the bottom of my thyroid and from my heart and from my fart for being you and showing up authentically and doing this from across the seas in Europe. Which part of Europe are you in?
I'm in Florence, Italy for a couple of months before we head to a different part of Italy. Yeah.
You're in your roots, girlfriend.
I am.
Wherever you are, be right there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Diane. Thanks for doing all this for everyone.
And thank you for doing it for us and being completely raw. Love you, sister.
All right. Ciao. Sending you love.
You right back at you.